She was 6 months pregnant, glowing with the promise of new life, when she walked into her husband's office with homemade lunch and found him with his secretary sprawled across his desk. The betrayal was devastating enough, but when the mistress saw her standing there, belly round with child, she didn't apologize. Instead, she smiled coldly and said, "Finally, the fat cow knows." Then she lunged forward and shoved Elena so hard she crashed into the wall, clutching her stomach in terror. What neither her cheating husband Marcus nor his vicious mistress knew was that Elena wasn't just any pregnant housewife. She was the estranged daughter of tech mogul Vincent Romano, who had been searching for her for 15 years. And in 24 hours, Marcus would discover that attacking a Romano came with consequences that would shatter his world completely. Elena Castellano had always been the quiet type, the kind of woman who preferred books to parties and saw the good in everyone, sometimes to her own detriment. At 28, she had devoted 7 years of her life to being the perfect wife to Marcus Blackwood, a mid-level insurance executive who treated their modest suburban home like a hotel and her like unpaid staff. She had given up her dreams of finishing her master's degree in literature to support his career, working part-time at a local bookstore to help pay the bills while maintaining their household with military precision. The pregnancy had been a surprise, but Elena embraced it with the fierce joy that marked everything she did. She read every pregnancy book, attended every appointment alone because Marcus was always too busy with clients, and spent her evenings knitting tiny sweaters while he worked late at the office. Or so she thought. Marcus Blackwood was everything Elena was not: loud, ambitious, and utterly convinced that he deserved more than his current station in life. At 32, he had grown resentful of their simple life, their small house, and what he saw as Elena's lack of sophistication. He wanted a wife who could network at company parties, who understood wine and could discuss market trends, not someone who got excited about library book sales and homemade pasta sauce. Enter Natasha Vance, his new secretary at Pinnacle Insurance. 24, blonde, and ruthlessly ambitious, she had made it clear from day one that she was interested in more than filing and answering phones. She wore designer knockoffs, spoke confidently about things she'd read in business magazines, and most importantly, she made Marcus feel important. She laughed at his jokes, complimented his tie choices, and never asked him to help with household chores or discuss baby names. Their affair had started 3 months ago, around the time Elena entered her second trimester. Marcus told himself it wasn't really cheating since Elena was so focused on the pregnancy anyway. He deserved some attention, some excitement. Natasha made him feel like the successful executive he imagined himself to be, rather than the middle manager struggling to make ends meet that he actually was. On that fateful Tuesday afternoon, Elena had been feeling particularly domestic. She'd spent the morning preparing Marcus's favorite meal, herb-crusted salmon with roasted vegetables, thinking it might be nice to surprise him at work. They hadn't been spending much time together lately, and she hoped a romantic lunch might rekindle some of their connection before the baby arrived. The offices of Pinnacle Insurance occupied the 3rd floor of a modest downtown building. Elena had visited exactly twice in 7 years of marriage, both times for company Christmas parties that Marcus seemed embarrassed to have her attend. She knew something was wrong the moment she stepped off the elevator and saw the receptionist's face. A mixture of panic and pity that made Elena's stomach clench with something that had nothing to do with pregnancy. "Mrs. Blackwood," the receptionist stammered, "Marcus didn't mention you were coming by. I wanted to surprise him," Elena said softly, holding up the insulated lunch bag. "Is he in his office?" The receptionist's eyes darted toward the hallway. He's in a meeting. Maybe you should call first next time?" But Elena was already walking down the hallway, her sensible flats silent on the carpet. She could hear laughter coming from Marcus's office, the kind of intimate laughter that made her heart start to race. She paused outside the door, her hand on the handle, telling herself she was being paranoid, that pregnancy hormones were making her imagine things. Then she heard Marcus's voice, low and affectionate. "God, Natasha, you're incredible. Elena never makes me feel like this." The words hit her like a physical blow. Elena stood there for a moment, 6 months pregnant with his child, holding his favorite lunch, listening to her husband tell another woman how inadequate she was. Part of her wanted to turn around, go home, pretend she'd never heard anything. But a stronger part, the part that had survived foster care, and put herself through college and never backed down from a challenge, made her turn that handle. Marcus was leaning back in his chair, his tie loosened, while Natasha perched on the edge of his desk in a skirt so short it barely qualified as clothing. They were close enough to kiss, his hand on her thigh, her fingers playing with his collar. The scene was intimate and devastating, made worse by how comfortable they looked together, how natural. Elena. Marcus jerked back so hard he nearly fell out of his chair. What are you doing here? Elena couldn't speak. She just stood there, lunch bag in hand, belly prominent in her simple maternity dress, staring at the tableau that destroyed her marriage in an instant. This wasn't some momentary lapse of judgment or drunken mistake. This was a relationship, complete with inside jokes and casual intimacy and the kind of chemistry she hadn't felt with Marcus in years. Natasha, however, was not similarly frozen. She slid off the desk slowly, smoothing her skirt with deliberate casualness. "Oh," she said, her voice dripping with false surprise. "You must be the wife." The way she said it, like Elena was some irrelevant third party rather than the woman Marcus had promised to love and honor, sent a surge of fury through Elena's shock. 7 years, Elena said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. 7 years of marriage, and this is how you... Look, Elena, Marcus interrupted, running his hands through his hair. You don't understand. This isn't. It's not what it looks like. Natasha let out a sharp laugh. Really, Marcus? We're going with that? She turned to Elena with a smile that was pure venom. Honey, it's exactly what it looks like. Marcus and I have been together for months. We're in love. The word love hit Elena like a slap. She looked at Marcus, searching his face for some denial, some indication that Natasha was lying or exaggerating. Instead, she saw guilt and something worse, relief. He was relieved to be caught. Is that true? Elena asked him directly. Marcus couldn't meet her eyes. Elena, you have to understand, is it true? She repeated, louder this time. Yes, he said finally. Yes, it's true. I love her. Elena felt something break inside her chest, something that had nothing to do with her heart and everything to do with her faith in basic human decency. She'd known their marriage wasn't perfect, but she'd never imagined this level of betrayal, this kind of calculated cruelty. She set the lunch bag down carefully on the chair by the door. I made your favorite, she said absently. Herb-crusted salmon. Elena, I've been making your favorites for 7 years, she continued, her voice growing stronger. Every birthday, every anniversary, every random Tuesday when I thought you might be having a bad day at work. I gave up my master's degree for you. I gave up my dreams for you. I gave up everything for you. Natasha rolled her eyes dramatically. Oh, please, spare us the martyr routine. You think making dinner and doing laundry makes you some kind of saint? You're boring, honey. You're plain and boring, and you never wanted to be anything more than a housewife. Elena turned to look at her, really look at her, for the first time. Natasha was beautiful in the artificial way of someone who spent more on makeup than Elena spent on groceries. She was young and confident and cruel, the kind of woman who took what she wanted without considering the consequences. You don't know anything about me, Elena said calmly. I know enough, Natasha shot back. I know Marcus was miserable with you. I know he's been planning to leave you for weeks. We were just waiting for the right time. After the baby? Elena asked, her hand moving instinctively to her belly. Marcus flinched. Elena, we can work something out with custody. Finally, the fat cow knows, Natasha interrupted with a vicious smile. She was enjoying this, Elena realized. The other woman was actually taking pleasure in destroying a pregnant woman's life. Elena stared at her in shock. In all her 28 years, through foster homes and college struggles, and every challenge life had thrown her way, she had never encountered such casual cruelty. And that's when Natasha made the mistake that would cost both her and Marcus everything. Maybe it was the pregnancy hormones, or maybe it was just the intoxication of finally speaking her truth, but Natasha wasn't done. You know what? I'm glad you found out this way, she continued, taking a step closer to Elena. Because now you can stop living in this pathetic fantasy where you matter, where anyone could love someone like you. Elena could feel tears starting, could feel the weight of 7 years of trying to be enough for a man who was never going to appreciate her. But then Natasha kept talking. Look at you, she sneered, gesturing at Elena's simple dress, her sensible shoes, her makeup-free face. You're nothing. You're nobody. You're just a fat, pregnant nobody who never had a chance of keeping a man like Marcus. And then, perhaps carried away by her own cruelty, Natasha stepped forward and gave Elena a hard shove, her hands connecting with Elena's shoulders and sending her stumbling backward. Elena's back hit the wall hard enough to knock the wind out of her, her hands flying instinctively to protect her belly as she struggled to catch her breath. For a terrifying moment, she felt a sharp pain in her abdomen and thought something might be wrong with the baby. "Natasha!" Marcus shouted, but he didn't move to help Elena. He just stood there, torn between his mistress and his pregnant wife, choosing neither. Elena stayed against the wall for a long moment, waiting for the pain to subside, making sure the baby was okay. When she finally looked up, she saw Natasha smirking with satisfaction and Marcus looking uncomfortable but not apologetic. "You pushed me," Elena said, her voice filled with something that might have been wonder. "You pushed a pregnant woman." "You were in my way," Natasha said with a shrug. That's when something shifted in Elena's eyes. The shock and hurt were still there, but underneath them was something else, something colder and infinitely more dangerous. She straightened slowly, her hands still protective over her belly, and looked at both of them with a clarity that hadn't been there before. "You have no idea what you just did," Elena said quietly. "Either of you." Marcus frowned. "Elena, you're being dramatic. My name," Elena interrupted, "isn't Elena Castellano. It hasn't been for 15 years. She reached into her purse and pulled out her driver's license, holding it up so they could see it clearly. "It's Elena Romano. I'm Vincent Romano's daughter." For a moment, neither Marcus nor Natasha reacted. The name clearly meant nothing to them. Then Marcus's frown deepened. "Romano," he repeated slowly. "Like Romano Technologies? That Romano?" Elena smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "That Romano. The billionaire you always complained was ruining the insurance industry with his tech innovations. The man whose company is worth more than the GDP of most small countries. That's my father." The color drained from Marcus's face as the implications hit him. Vincent Romano wasn't just wealthy. He was powerful, connected, and notoriously protective of his family. He was also known for his ruthless business practices and his ability to destroy competitors who crossed him. But you said your parents were dead," Marcus stammered. "You said you grew up in foster care." "I did grow up in foster care," Elena confirmed. "Because I ran away from home when I was 13 after a fight with my father. I was young and stupid and proud, and I thought I could make it on my own. I legally changed my name when I turned 18, and I've been Elena Castellano ever since." She turned to Natasha, who was looking confused and increasingly pale. "You want to know why I never wanted to be anything more than a housewife? Because I spent my childhood watching what wealth and power do to people. I wanted a simple life with a good man who loved me for who I was, not what my family could give him." Elena laughed, and the sound was bitter. "I actually thought I'd found that with you, Marcus. I thought you loved me for me. I was wrong about that, wasn't I?" Marcus was doing rapid calculations in his head. Romano Technologies had been in the news just last week, a merger that had made Vincent Romano one of the richest men in America. If Elena was really his daughter. "Elena," he said carefully, "we should talk about this. Privately." "Oh, now you want to talk privately," Elena observed. "When you thought I was nobody, you were perfectly fine having your mistress humiliate me in front of anyone who might be listening. But now that you know who my father is, suddenly you want privacy." Natasha was catching on now, and her face was white with fear. "You're lying," she said, but her voice shook. "You're making this up." Elena pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found what she was looking for. She held the phone up so they could see the screen. The contact read, "Dad, V. Romano," with a number that had far too many digits to be anything but international. "I haven't spoken to him in 15 years, Elena said conversationally. "We had a terrible fight about my boyfriend at the time. Ironically, he said the boy was just using me for money, and I accused him of being paranoid and controlling. I was so angry that I ran away and never went back." She looked down at her phone thoughtfully. "But he never stopped looking for me. I get reports sometimes, from private investigators he's hired. He always made sure they knew to tell me that he loved me and wanted me to come home, but that he'd respect my decision if I wanted to stay hidden." Elena's fingers hovered over the call button. "The thing is, I think he stopped looking as actively in recent years because I seemed happy. Married, stable, living a quiet life. But attacking his pregnant daughter. Well, that changes things, doesn't it? Elena, wait. Marcus said, panic creeping into his voice. Let's think about this rationally. Rationally, Elena repeated. Like how you rationally decided to cheat on your pregnant wife? Or like how your girlfriend here rationally decided to physically assault me? She looked at Natasha, who was now visibly shaking. You wanted to know who I really was? Let me tell you. I'm the daughter of a man who once bought an entire airline because they treated his assistant rudely. I'm the daughter of a man who's been known to destroy entire companies because they crossed him in minor ways. I'm the daughter of a man who loves me more than anything in this world and has been waiting 15 years for me to come home. Elena pressed the call button. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered, speaking in rapid Italian. Elena responded in the same language, and even though neither Marcus nor Natasha understood the words, they could hear the emotion in both voices: surprise, joy, love, and then, as Elena's tone changed, growing fury. The conversation lasted only a few minutes, but it felt like hours to the two people watching. They could hear Elena explaining the situation, could hear the sharp questions from the other end of the line, could hear Elena's voice growing steadier and more confident with every exchange. When she finally hung up, Elena looked at Marcus and Natasha with an expression of calm certainty that was more terrifying than any rage could have been. He's sending a plane, she said simply. It should be here within the hour. He wants to meet his grandchild's father, and he's very interested in meeting the woman who thought it was appropriate to assault his pregnant daughter. Marcus made a sound that might have been a whimper. Elena, please, you have to understand. I understand perfectly, Elena cut him off. I understand that you never loved me. I understand that you were planning to abandon me and your child. I understand that you're both exactly the kind of people my father warned me about. She moved toward the door, then paused to look back at them. Oh, and Marcus? You might want to start updating your resume. Because as of this afternoon, Romano Technologies will own a controlling interest in Pinnacle Insurance. Hostile takeover, you understand. Dad's very good at those. She picked up the lunch bag she'd brought. I should probably take this with me. Somehow I don't think you'll be very hungry for the next few days. Elena walked out of that office with her head high and her heart breaking. But underneath the pain was something she hadn't felt in years, the knowledge that she wasn't powerless, wasn't nobody, wasn't alone. She was a Romano, and whatever came next, she wouldn't face it as the discarded wife of a mediocre insurance executive. She would face it as the beloved daughter of one of the most powerful men in America. The plane that landed at the city's private airfield 90 minutes later was a Gulfstream G650, the kind of aircraft that cost more than most people made in several lifetimes. Elena stood on the tarmac, still in her simple maternity dress but somehow transformed, watching as the stairs lowered and her father appeared in the doorway. Vincent Romano was 62 years old, silver-haired, and imposing in the way that only truly powerful men could be. He was also crying as he walked down those stairs toward the daughter he'd lost 15 years ago. Elena, he said in Italian, mia cara figlia. Papa, she whispered, and then she was in his arms, sobbing for everything she'd lost and everything she was about to gain. Behind Vincent came a small army of people, lawyers, executives, bodyguards, and assistants. Elena recognized the type from her childhood, the kind of entourage that surrounded her father wherever he went, ready to execute his will with ruthless efficiency. Tell me everything, Vincent said quietly, his hands gentle on her face as he examined the bruise forming on her shoulder where she'd hit the wall. Elena told him. Every detail, every betrayal, every moment of the last 7 years when she'd settled for less than she deserved because she'd forgotten who she was. And as she spoke, she watched her father's face transform from loving concern to something far more dangerous. He hit you, Vincent said quietly. She hit me. Natasha, my husband just watched. Vincent nodded slowly, then turned to one of his lawyers. I want to know everything about both of them. I want to know what they owe, who they owe it to, where they work, where they shop, where they get their coffee. I want their entire lives mapped out within the hour. The lawyer nodded and immediately began making calls. Papa, you don't have to. They hurt my daughter, Vincent said simply. They hurt my grandchild. There are consequences for such things. While the lawyers worked, Vincent held Elena close, making up for 15 years of missed conversations in the space of an hour. He told her about the company, about the fortune that would someday be hers, About the grandfather who'd died missing her and the grandmother who'd left everything to Elena in her will. You're worth approximately $2 billion, Vincent said casually, as if discussing the weather. Your trust fund has been growing for 15 years. The house in Tuscany that you loved as a child is still yours. And there's an apartment in Manhattan that I've kept exactly as you left it, just in case you ever wanted to come home. Elena stared at him. $2 billion. She'd been clipping coupons and working part-time at a bookstore while sitting on a fortune that could solve every problem she'd ever had. But I ran away, she said. I said terrible things. You were 13 and in love, Vincent said with a smile. I was overprotective and controlling. We were both wrong, cara mia. What matters is that you're here now. One of the lawyers approached them discreetly. Sir, we've completed the initial research on the subjects. Vincent looked at Elena. Do you want to know what we found? Elena hesitated. Part of her wanted to just leave, take her father's hand, and disappear from this life forever. But another part, the part that had been humiliated and betrayed and physically assaulted, wanted justice. Tell me, she said. The lawyer consulted his tablet. Marcus Blackwood, age 32. Middle management at Pinnacle Insurance. Salary $67,000 annually. Currently 3 months behind on mortgage payments. Carries $43,000 in credit card debt and recently took out a personal loan for $15,000. His employment record shows consistent mediocrity and several complaints from female colleagues about inappropriate behavior. Elena wasn't surprised by any of that, but it still hurt to hear her marriage reduced to such stark terms. Natasha Vance, age 24. The lawyer continued. Recently hired as secretary at Pinnacle Insurance after being terminated from 2 previous positions for inappropriate relationships with supervisors. Currently behind on student loan payments. Drives a leased BMW that she cannot afford and has been using Marcus Blackwood's credit cards for personal purchases. She's been using his credit cards? Elena asked. Approximately $8,000 in charges over the past 2 months, the lawyer confirmed. Designer clothing, jewelry, spa treatments, and a weekend trip to Las Vegas that Mr. Blackwood's wife presumably knew nothing about. Elena felt a bitter laugh bubble up. Marcus had been complaining for months about money being tight, asking her to cut back on groceries, while his mistress spent thousands on designer handbags. What else? Vincent asked quietly. Pinnacle Insurance is privately owned by the Henderson Group, which has been looking to sell for the past year. They've been struggling financially and would likely accept any reasonable offer. As for the individuals, both Mr. Blackwood and Ms. Vance have several vulnerabilities that could be exploited should you choose to do so. Vincent looked at Elena. It's your choice, Cara. We can make them disappear from your life entirely, or we can ensure they face consequences for their actions. Either way, you never have to see them again. Elena thought about it. She thought about 7 years of putting Marcus first, of making herself smaller so he could feel bigger, of believing that her dreams mattered less than his comfort. She thought about Natasha's cruel smile, the casual way she'd pushed a pregnant woman, the vicious pleasure she'd taken in Elena's pain. I want them to understand what they've lost, Elena said finally. I want them to know exactly who they chose to betray. Vincent smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Consider it done. By 5 o'clock that afternoon, the wheels of justice were already in motion. Romano Technologies announced its acquisition of the Henderson Group, including all subsidiary companies, in a deal worth $200 million. The announcement made national news, not just for the size of the transaction, but for the speed at which it had been completed. Marcus first learned about it when his boss called an emergency meeting for all employees. He sat in the conference room with his colleagues, still reeling from Elena's revelation and the cryptic threat about her father taking over the company. Surely she'd been bluffing. Surely no one could move that fast, even a billionaire. Then the CEO of Pinnacle Insurance walked into the room looking like he'd aged 10 years in a single afternoon. As of 4 p.m. today, the CEO announced, Pinnacle Insurance is now owned by Romano Technologies. We are assured that there will be no immediate changes to day-to-day operations, but there will likely be some restructuring in the coming weeks. Marcus felt his world tilt. Romano Technologies. Elena hadn't been bluffing after all. Sir, one of his colleagues asked, do we know what kind of restructuring they have in mind? The CEO's eyes found Marcus across the room, and his expression was grim. I believe some personnel changes are likely, particularly in cases where employee behavior has not met company standards. Marcus's mouth went dry. He tried to catch the CEO's eye, tried to communicate somehow that this was all a misunderstanding, but the older man looked away. The meeting ended with assurances that everyone would be kept informed as changes developed, but Marcus knew he was living on borrowed time. He stumbled back to his office, his mind racing with calculations. If Elena was really Vincent Romano's daughter, if she really had access to that kind of money and power, then his life as he knew it was over. He found Natasha at her desk, frantically packing her belongings into a cardboard box. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Getting out of here," she said without looking up. "Someone from HR called 10 minutes ago. My employment has been terminated effective immediately. Apparently, there's been some concerns about my conduct with supervisors." Marcus felt his last hope crumble. Did they say anything about me? Natasha looked up at him then, and her expression was pure venom. "Are you kidding me? You told me she was nobody. You told me her family had money, but nothing special. You never mentioned her father was Vincent fucking Romano." "I didn't know," Marcus protested. "She never told me." "Well, congratulations," Natasha snarled. "Because of your lies, I've lost my job, my references are destroyed, and apparently Romano Technologies has enough influence to make sure I never work in this industry again." She hefted the box and pushed past him. "This is all your fault. You and your pathetic midlife crisis. I hope it was worth it." Natasha was gone by 5:30, taking her designer clothes and her cruelty with her, leaving Marcus alone in his office to contemplate the ruins of his life. At exactly 6 p.m., Marcus's phone rang. The caller ID showed Vincent Romano's office. "Mr. Blackwood," said a polite voice. "This is James Sullivan, Mr. Romano's personal attorney. Mr. Romano would like to meet with you this evening to discuss your marriage to his daughter Elena. Are you available?" Marcus's hands shook as he held the phone. Yes, I suppose I could. Excellent. A car will pick you up at your office building at 7 p.m. Please bring any documentation you have regarding your marriage, finances, and recent activities with Ms. Vance." The line went dead. Marcus spent the next hour in a cold sweat, trying to figure out how to explain or justify what Vincent Romano had undoubtedly already learned. How do you tell a billionaire that you cheated on his daughter because you were bored? How do you justify allowing your mistress to assault a pregnant woman? The car that picked him up was a black sedan with tinted windows, and the driver said nothing during the 30-minute trip to a downtown office building. Marcus was escorted to the top floor, where Vincent Romano waited in a conference room that probably cost more than Marcus's annual salary. Vincent was not alone. Flanked by lawyers, accountants, and what looked like private investigators, he sat at the head of a long table covered with documents. Elena sat beside him, transformed from the woman Marcus had married into someone he barely recognized. She wore a simple but clearly expensive dress. Her hair was professionally styled, and she carried herself with a confidence that took his breath away. "Sit," Vincent said without preamble. Marcus sat. Vincent slid a thick folder across the table. "These are the divorce papers. You will sign them tonight. Elena is asking for nothing from you. No alimony, no division of assets, nothing. In exchange, you will relinquish all parental rights to the child she's carrying." "What?" Marcus looked up sharply. "I can't sign away my rights to my own child." "You can and you will," Vincent said calmly, "because the alternative is much worse for you." Another folder slid across the table. "This contains documentation of your affair, including credit card records showing that you used marital funds to support your mistress. It also contains witness statements about Ms. Vance's assault on Elena, security footage from your office building, and evidence of financial fraud relating to your use of company resources for personal relationships." Marcus's hands trembled as he opened the folder. It was all there: receipts, photos, statements, bank records. They'd assembled a complete picture of his betrayal in a matter of hours. "Any one of these issues could result in criminal charges," Vincent continued. "Taken together, they represent grounds for a lawsuit that would destroy you financially and professionally for the rest of your life." Elena spoke for the first time. "I don't want your money, Marcus. I don't want anything from you. I just want you out of my life and away from my child." Marcus looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. This wasn't the quiet, accommodating woman he'd married. This was someone powerful, someone connected, someone who could destroy him with a phone call. If I sign these papers, he said slowly, what happens to me? Vincent's smile was cold. You get to disappear quietly. You'll be terminated from Pinnacle Insurance tomorrow morning with cause, which means no severance and no references. Your mortgage will be called in immediately. Romano Technologies now owns the bank that holds your loan. You'll have 30 days to vacate the house. Marcus felt sick. Where am I supposed to go? How am I supposed to live? That's not my concern, Vincent said. You should have thought about consequences before you betrayed my daughter. But I have nowhere to go. No job, no money. You'll have whatever you can carry, Elena said quietly. Everything else belongs to the life you chose to destroy. The reality of his situation hit Marcus like a physical blow. He'd lost everything, his job, his house, his marriage, his unborn child, in the span of 8 hours. All because he'd been stupid enough to underestimate the quiet woman who'd loved him. With shaking hands, he signed the papers. Elena felt no satisfaction watching Marcus's world crumble. There was no joy in revenge, only a hollow sense of justice and the relief that came with finally walking away from a life that had never truly fit her. As Marcus was escorted out of the building by security, Elena turned to her father. What happens now? Now, Vincent said, you come home. There's someone I want you to meet. The someone turned out to be Dr. Alessandro Moretti, a pediatric surgeon who ran free clinics in some of Italy's poorest neighborhoods. He was Vincent's business partner in several philanthropic ventures, and he had flown in from Rome the moment Vincent called to tell him about Elena's return. Alessandro has been asking about you for years, Vincent said as they drove toward the family estate on the outskirts of the city. He was devastated when you disappeared. He's never married, you know. Says he's been waiting for the right woman. Elena remembered Alessandro dimly from her childhood, a serious young man who'd been studying medicine and working with her father's foundation. He'd been kind to the teenage Elena, treating her with respect when most of her father's associates barely acknowledged her existence. They met again in the library of her childhood home, a room that had been preserved exactly as she'd left it 15 years ago. Alessandro was 43 now, distinguished and graying at the temples, but his eyes were the same warm brown she remembered. Elena, he said softly, you're even more beautiful than I imagined you'd become. Alessandro, she replied, and was surprised by how naturally his name came. Papa says you've been asking about me. Every day for 15 years, he confirmed. I always hoped you'd come home eventually. They talked for hours that night. About his work with children, her abandoned dreams of literature, the baby growing inside her, and the future that stretched ahead of them both. Alessandro had built an empire of his own, medical centers, research facilities, and charitable foundations that served children around the world. He was wealthy in his own right, but more importantly, he was good in a way that reminded Elena why she'd wanted a simple life in the first place. I've made mistakes, Elena told him honestly. I married a man who didn't love me. I wasted 7 years trying to be someone I wasn't. We've all made mistakes, Alessandro replied. The question is what we do next. What Elena did next was rebuild her life from the ground up. She moved into the Manhattan apartment her father had kept for her, enrolled in a graduate program to finish her master's degree, and began working with Alessandro's foundation to establish literacy programs in underserved communities. Marcus, meanwhile, discovered that Vincent Romano's reach extended far beyond the insurance industry. No company would hire him. Romano Technologies had an extensive network of business relationships, and word had quietly gone out that Marcus Blackwood was persona non grata. His house was foreclosed on within 60 days. His credit cards were canceled, his bank accounts frozen pending investigation of potential fraud. Within 3 months, Marcus was living in his car and eating at soup kitchens, a stunning fall from middle-class respectability that shocked everyone who knew him. He tried reaching out to Elena several times, begging for mercy, promising to be a better man if she would just call off her father's campaign against him. Elena never responded to his messages. Natasha fared slightly better, managing to find work as a waitress at a chain restaurant 3 states away after changing her name and fabricating her employment history. But her dreams of marrying wealth and living in luxury were over. She'd crossed the wrong family, and the consequences would follow her for the rest of her life. Elena's baby was born on a snowy February morning. A healthy daughter she named Sophia. Alessandro was there for the birth, holding Elena's hand through the labor and crying when he first held the infant who would become his daughter in every way that mattered. They were married 6 months later in a small ceremony in Tuscany, surrounded by family and the friends who had never stopped loving Elena despite her long absence. Vincent walked her down the aisle, tears streaming down his face as he gave his daughter to a man who would cherish her the way she deserved. Alessandro adopted Sofia legally before her first birthday, giving her his name and his unconditional love. Marcus had signed away his parental rights so completely that there was no legal connection between him and the child he'd helped create. Elena's memoir, Finding Home, A Journey from Loss to Love, became a bestseller within weeks of publication. She donated the proceeds to literacy programs and domestic violence shelters, turning her painful experience into something that could help other women find their own strength. 2 years after that devastating afternoon in Marcus's office, Elena stood on the terrace of her home in Tuscany, watching Alessandro teach 2-year-old Sofia to walk in the garden below. She was pregnant again, this time with a baby conceived in love and wanted by both parents. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was Marcus, writing from some internet cafe or public library, his latest attempt to make contact. Elena, the message read, I know I have no right to ask, but I'm desperate. I'm homeless, jobless, and alone. I've learned my lesson. I understand now what I lost when I betrayed you. Could you find it in your heart to forgive me? Could we try again? I'll do anything. Be anyone you need me to be. I still love you. I love our daughter too, even though I never got to meet her. Please, just give me one chance to prove I've changed. Elena read the message twice, then deleted it without responding. She turned off her phone and went downstairs to join her husband and daughter in the garden, where Sofia was taking her first wobbling steps toward her mother's outstarched arms. Marcus Blackwood had made his choice that Tuesday afternoon when he chose his mistress over his wife, his pleasure over his promises, his selfishness over his family. Elena Romano Moretti had made hers too, and she chose love, dignity, and a future built on truth rather than the ruins of the past. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. Some betrayals are so complete that forgiveness becomes irrelevant. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living so well that your former life seems like a bad dream you barely remember. Elena had learned that attacking a Romano came with consequences that lasted a lifetime. But she had also learned that being a Romano came with power, privilege, and most importantly, the ability to choose exactly how her story would end. And her story ended with happiness, success, and the kind of love she'd always deserved but had never dared to believe she could find. Marcus's story ended very differently, but that was no longer Elena's concern. She had chosen her ending, and it was beautiful.